We are honored to have four distinguished mayors with us. Mayor Joe Riley, who is here in a double capacity as a mayor and as a Nichols Prize winner, as you've heard. With all due respect to a certain ex-mayor of my city, if there's anyone in America who truly deserves the title of America's mayor, it's Joe Riley, actually. Joe Reardon, former mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, and now president and chief executive officer of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, proving that the Kansas City area transcends any prejudices about state lines. The current mayor of Kansas City, Sly James, who we were all honored to hear an extraordinary talk from at dinner last evening, and Madeline Rogero, the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee, who was just explaining to us backstage that she ran virtually unopposed for her in her last election. So we have
the best way to run.
That's exactly right. Four mayors with an extraordinary record of achievement. Please join me in welcoming them all. Now, our plan this morning is to make these panels as much as possible a kind of informal conversation and not a set of very formal talks. But I've asked each of our panelists to just begin with some thoughts on the differences between what I think the ULI has brilliantly called 18-hour cities, which they've all led, and the larger 24-hour cities. We're going to talk initially about what, other than size, makes Knoxville different from Houston, or Kansas City different from Chicago. Are the problems different, or are they just similar, just smaller in scale, rather? Are the opportunities greater or lesser in 18-hour cities? You surely face similar challenges of inequality, of growth, of racial and economic pressures, of urban design, of neighborhood scale, of neighborhood preservation. But what can Charleston do that New York and Los Angeles can't? Can 18-hour cities offer lessons that 24-hour cities can learn from? And conversely, I'd love to know what the mayors feel they may have learned from larger cities. So we'll begin asking each panelist just to reflect on this question. And if we may begin with Mayor Riley, we'd be pleased.
Well, thank you, Paul,
Sure.
and thank all of you for being here, and I thank the ULI for all the work they do in our country and around the world, and sessions like this enhance the understanding of livable and successful communities, and certainly the Nichols family and the Nichols committee for the honor that I received, one of the great honors of my life. In many respects, they are so similar. I can talk with the mayor of a small city in my state, and talk with the mayor of a large American city, and so much of what we talk about has great similarities. It is the scale that is different. I think that with the emerging 18-hour cities or mid-tier cities, what you see is a wonderful American opportunity, because you have what our culture happily is embracing, and that is the energy and the diversity of the urban experience. A few generations ago, the only experience one would envision, the American dream, was the suburban one own some land, in the suburban enclave, and we know that that's the more natural human desire, is to receive the benefit and the energy and the inspiration and nourishment of being around people And so what mid-tier cities give you that opportunity, and then the wonderful discovery that they are experiencing, that the citizens, human beings, make the decision on themselves, and to live near others, as I mentioned, the downtowns coming back, because that's a natural, joyful thing as well, the public realm that you get to use and experience 18 hours a day. We had a challenge in Charleston that some trying to use it 23 hours a day, and we had to do a little work on that, which created some controversies, but it's one of the problems to have. And so I think that what you have is the opportunity in all these cities and the responsibility to keep working on the scale and a neighborhood scale. And we worked hard in Charleston to do that. And we're not a huge city, but we have 120 neighborhood councils. They're greatly involved in the governance of the city. I met with the presidents on a regular basis, the people, so that each citizen feels a real place and has a voice and is connected. And then the bigger, the sum of the parts is greater. And so I think we are in a time of the great emergence of cities of our comparable size. And then, I can talk all day, I think the challenges we all face are similar as well. And one of the great challenges for America is affordable housing. And that's a great challenge for a lot of reasons. But a great city is a place where all kinds of people live and use on a regular basis. That reinforcement of our common humanity and our daily lives is so important. And that's a challenge for America and a challenge for our cities that are becoming so successful that the affordable housing options become more limited.
Right. Thank you. Mayor Reardon?
Thank you very much. It's great to be, I'm honored to be here, honestly, and it's particularly to sit next to Joe Reardon. I just have to, before I comment on your question, let you know that, and many of you know this, but as a former mayor, Joe Reardon has had an influence on hundreds of mayors across the U.S. in so many different ways. Early on in my tenure as mayor, I got invited to be part of the Mayor's Institute on City Design. Got to go to Charleston with I think we had 4 mayors total. And not only was it a great place for me to understand more the mayor's role in good city design and in shaping a city and how important it was, but you got to spend time with Joe Reardon and the practitioner himself, who could show you in his city how he had helped reshape it and make it vibrant in an urban way in the downtown, and down to the finest of details of understanding it. So I can't begin to tell you how influential, Joe, you were to me as mayor, and hundreds of, it's not unique to me, hundreds of mayors is amazing thing. With respect to the question, and really I'm going to lean on Mayor James because he's still in the practice, and he can talk so well about this. But my observations would be in the mid-tier cities is a couple things that many of the issues are the same, and some of the opportunities are the same, right? The advantages I think the mid-tier city has is the scale of the city and where the city sits sort of in the spectrum. So in so many mid-tier cities, they're in some way a process around reinvention or reimagination, and there's an aggressiveness about that I think is very important. And then that turns into a willingness, particularly in the scale of the city, to be more nimble in approach to projects or to issues. And then, as Mayor Reardon said, many times the scale of the city lends itself to those in the highest of leadership positions being very integrated down to the neighborhood level into the community, and not every city of size can have that kind of connection, which leads to an amazing amount of cross-collaboration to allow things to happen that can be activated fairly quickly because the infrastructure is already there. In my estimation, kudos to Mayor James and the city, Smart Cities is a great example. The ability to get the whole city together, very collaborative across multitudes of different institutions, bring them together think innovative about how to move the city forward and make something substantive be put in place to compete. Those are strategic advantages, that ability to be nimble and to collaborate. The scale of the city allows, I think, for innovation to occur in faster and deeper ways. And for those that want to come and be part of a mid-sized city in that way to help shape it, you can understand impact in a pretty rewarding way because of the scale of that city. And I think those are things that are exciting about mid-tier cities relative to opportunities and dealing with challenges.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point because we think of the very large cities like New York and Los Angeles as places that are ahead of the curve culturally, but in fact, they are in other ways, paradoxically, harder places for innovation to actually take root. Because you have so much more process and so many more layers to get through to make it happen, actually. Yeah. Mayor James.
Again, thanks to everybody for being here, and thanks to Mayor Riley. Mayor's Institute of City Design is a fabulous organization. It's great to see Joe here. He abandoned me when he decided not to run for another term in KCK, but that's okay. And Madeline, it's always good to see Madeline. We see each other a lot. To see her again over the weekend down in Oklahoma City. Although this may be termed an 18-hour city, I will tell you that from a mayor standpoint, the job is 24/7, 366. I know it's supposed to be 365, but they sneak an extra day in there on us for work at some time. I think that there's a number of things, and I'll be a little more specific about Kansas City. Kansas City is, in my opinion, a unique situation because there are very few places in this entire country where there is a very economically viable city sitting on a state line next to a very economically viable other side. That does not happen in very many places. Because of that, there's a lot of friction, but there's also a lot of opportunity for collaboration. So when we're looking at economies, for example, we're not just looking at Kansas City, we're not just looking at Johnson County or Wyandotte County, we're looking at the region. And I think that adds some very interesting nuances to what we have available to us. I also think one of the major differences in an 18-hour city, if that's what we're calling it, is that there is much greater opportunity for personal leadership. We see our constituents all the time, every day. I don't think that, and I know Michael Bloomberg, and I would guarantee you, he does not have the type of contact with the citizens of New York that we have with the citizens of this area, or that Madeline has with hers. And that's not to say he's doing a bad job or anything like that. That's just a whole different ball game in a city of that size. It's much more hands-on here. We have different struggles and same struggles. All cities struggle with infrastructure, but we're 318 square miles and 472,000 people, and that means low density. Manhattan is 38,000 per square mile. LA, I think, is like 29,000 per square mile. And if you look at each one of those dollars or those people as a dollar of infrastructure, obviously there's more in those places than elsewhere and in a smaller space. So the struggles that we have with infrastructure are different than the struggles that another city, 24-hour or 18-hour, may have with their infrastructure, but we all struggle with infrastructure. The struggles that we have with crime and violence are different, not necessarily because of the cities in some instances, but a lot of times because of the state legislatures and how they have legislated various things that impact cities' ability to deal hands-on with those types of issues. I don't think you can talk seriously about cities without considering the state legislatures that control those cities, and a lot of them really do seek to control the city.
Well, that is certainly something, though, that 18-hour or middle-tier cities share with much larger ones too.
Absolutely.
I mean, New York City struggles with Albany at least as much as you struggle with your state capital, if not more so, actually. So there's one issue in which you all have common cause.
Absolutely.
I would think. Mayor Rogero.
Right, it's Rogero. I'm just going to correct that. It's Rogero.
Please
Think of hair. Rogero.
Please forgive me.
That's all right. It's
Okay.
commonly misstated, so mispronounced, and so no problem. It's actually Spanish. So when you go forth, everything that you wanted to say has already been said, right? But I will repeat, this has been said a couple of times. I also started out as mayor this 5 years ago. One of the first things I did was go to Charleston, meet Mayor Riley, and participate in the Mayor's Institute on Civic Design, and it was a fabulous experience. And of course, I've been to Kansas City one time before now. It was about 2 years ago. I think it was for a Kaufman conference.
Entrepreneurs,
Yeah, entrepreneurship. And I got to see your barbecue. Mayor James made sure that I saw his favorite barbecue place. But I have to tell you, this is a beautiful
You just saw it. I ate there.
Well, we know. Well, it's just a fun part of working with him, right? Yeah, so we ate as well. So, but the tour yesterday was fabulous, and just to see what you all have here, and the sense of pride that you have in Kansas City, those who are on that bus and who talked about what has been accomplished here. And it's a beautiful city, and your preservation of so many of your beautiful historic buildings is outstanding. It's something, it's a value that we have as well in Knoxville. And I love big cities. I love going to Chicago and to New York and places like that, but I love living in a medium-sized city. We have about 185,000 people in our city, about 450 or so in the county, and I feel like it's when you're in a city that size, you can get your arms around it. You know what I mean? It's and as mayor, you can get your arms around the problems, the opportunities. It seems like there's great opportunity, as has been said, for leadership to get your arms around it, to work together. I think it's easier through public processes to really have a greater sense of shared values in a community that's smaller, like some of our cities are. So the issue of scale, I think, is absolutely right. We have a lot of the same problems, but they're and opportunities, but they're on a smaller scale. And again, you can get your arms around them to help solve them. In a city like ours, you can move there like I did 36 years ago, and in 10 years be a county commissioner, and then 31 years later be a mayor. And there are opportunities in Knoxville, at least, for leadership. That's one thing I used to be. It was very parochial. If you weren't born and raised there and hadn't lived there, and if your granddaddy and your grandma hadn't lived there, then there was no opportunity for you in leadership. That has changed. I think having a major university, an Oak Ridge National Lab, and more businesses coming in, choosing to live in a place with 4 seasons and a high quality of life. As more businesses and people look towards that type of a lifestyle, particularly the millennials, then I think it creates more of those opportunities for us to create that shared value and for people to come in and to achieve leadership positions and work together to really make us a more desirable community to live in. I think that's what all of us are seeing in our own cities.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Each of you has actually said so many things we can pick up on. Let me start, though, with a point that Mayor Rogero just made, because it makes me think of a whole other issue today that all cities, both large and medium and small, face. You made an interesting reference to attracting new citizens, new people. How, I think back to all the discussions more than a decade ago now after Hurricane Katrina about the insularity of New Orleans and about how New Orleans, in fact, had relatively less inflow and outflow of population than most cities, and how that played into the way all of that played out. Both in terms of immigration, which is, as we all know, a major issue in a certain presidential campaign at the moment, but also in terms of movement of citizens within the country. And Mayor James made reference last night, and again I think briefly just now, about Kansas City being attractive to millennials coming from elsewhere. All of you have talked about the appeal of affordable housing and the challenge of maintaining that affordability. how open do you feel your cities are to new residents, new occupants, new citizens of your city, whether they are coming from another American city or from abroad, and how important is that to ongoing growth and development in your city? I'd be grateful if all of you would pick up on that, and or whoever wants to talk
I'll
first.
go first, so
Let's
that
go. Right, okay, great.
then they won't have said everything I
All
wanted
right,
to
good,
say.
good. Yeah, you go first because we're picking up on something you said anyway,
yeah.
so you should.
Yeah, so I think that is something that has changed in Knoxville over the last 30-some years that I have lived there. And again, having the University of Tennessee, major research lab, Tennessee Valley Authority, those types of businesses that really attract people from all over the world, actually, to come to our area. But once they get here, they have to feel welcome, right? And so we have been very intentional as a community, at least in my time there, to encourage leadership through things like Introduction Knoxville, which is an orientation for new people who come in, a 6-week orientation, our Leadership Knoxville. Our chamber has reached out to diversity of businesses and people. We are intentionally trying to reach out to minority communities and create leadership opportunities and encourage them to get involved. But it's an intentional process, I think, in any city to make people feel welcome and to show that people are welcome in your city. But one of the things you have to offer, though, are arts and culture and quality of life and opportunities so people can enjoy the lifestyle and being in your community. You know, being in Knoxville, we have a couple of businesses like HGTV, Scripps Interactive Networks. They were in Cincinnati. They moved their headquarters to Knoxville. Also, Regal Cinemas, who was founded, you all have AMC. Regal Cinemas was founded by a gentleman in Knoxville. That's their headquarters now. A few companies like that, when they need to bring in people from New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, often the first response is, really, you're going to transfer me and my family to Knoxville? But they come, and then once they get here, the HR directors tell me they won't leave. You know, once they've been here about a year in Knoxville, they don't want to leave because there's a high quality of life, there's a good pace, there's excellent education, there's mountains, there's rivers. It's, you know, so there's a balanced lifestyle, and they don't want to leave and go back to the hustle and bustle of the bigger city.
There's something to be said for translating a 1-bedroom apartment into an 8-room house.
That helps as well, exactly. You can buy a lot of house in Knoxville, more so than some of the bigger cities. So, yeah, so that's...
Right, great.
You know,
Thank you.
I grew up in Kansas City in an era where people who lived here loved living here and said this was a great city to raise kids, and don't tell anybody, we don't want a bunch of people coming in. I always thought that was a little on the short-sighted side. And I remember a quote, there was a basketball player played on the Kansas City Kings when they were here before Sacramento stole them. Sorry, KJ. But he was being interviewed, and they said, well, how do you like living in Kansas City and playing in Kansas City? He says, you know, Kansas City is okay. You know, nothing really ever bad happens in Kansas City. Then again, nothing really ever good happens in Kansas City either. That has changed. We are extremely open to new people, and I will tell you right now that we have a lot of available housing for all of you who might want to think about sticking around. I will personally set you up with a great realtor, and we'll be happy to accommodate your housing needs, because we'd love to have everybody who is here stay here. We have done those things that are necessary to project a sense of openness. We've been very fortunate in that we've had some things happen here that have allowed us to project our sense of openness and our sense of our entire city outward in ways that we previously did not have. We've always had well, back in the 80s, we had a great baseball team that drew a lot of attraction. At some point before that, we had a great football team, but since I'm one of these very lucky people, I'm the only mayor in the history of Kansas City to have been in office when the MLS won the Cup and the Royals, we had an all-star game, and then the Royals went to the World Series twice and won it, and I was having dinner with the GM of the Chiefs, and I said, you know, what's missing on my trophy wall here? But those things attract attention. What else? Other things that attract attention? Google. Cannot underestimate the impact that it had when we were both in office at the same time, and we were on the road so much together that we hired an agent. I still haven't gotten my check, but notice that Joe's moved on and he's dressing a lot better. It was one of those things that we were able to leverage, and by leveraging that and making that headlines and being in different places and being in Spain and other places, in Paris, talking about these types of things, we have been able to use that to project out to the real currency of economic development, and that's talent. And when young talent sees a city that they think is cool, good stuff is going on, hey, I'm seeing a lot of stuff about Kansas City in the press, must be a cool place to live. Hey, let's check out the housing prices. We're at 19%, and we are rising, but we're at 19% of your exposable income, which is lower than the national average of larger cities for sure, and a lot of mid-sized cities as well. And then there are opportunities in the tech field, which seems to be sexy. Then we get a lot of play, and we get people who are interested. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to young millennial couples specifically, and they'll say, well, we just moved to Kansas City. And I'll say, okay, really, that's cool. What attracts you? Well, we wanted to get out of LA, and we were looking for something that had these various qualities. And I said, well, how did you pick Kansas City? Well, we started looking at things, and you guys have what we needed. One person said they put a pin in a map and came to visit and never left. All sorts of different things like that. Being open is not just a function of government and all of those things, however. Being open to people moving in is primarily a function of the people who are already here and how they greet and accept people. And I think that's one place that makes us stand out. We're very fortunate in that regard.
Great, thank you.
So mid-sized cities, always in this competition to attract business, but as both the mayors have said, the understanding that for your city to grow, you need to be attractive to all kinds of people from everywhere to come and be a part of you. And you've got to project that message at a higher level. You've got to be louder. You're not Chicago. You're not New York, to get that attention, because once they get here, they're going to love it, right? So what's interesting to me, this is how important I think this issue is to cities today, is cities are some of the loudest voices in resisting legislative initiatives that would somehow or another send a symbol that the city's not welcoming. So the religious objection bills, the bathroom bills, call it what you want.
Right.
When you've seen that dynamic play itself out at the state level, very often it's the city, the chamber, businesses that are the loudest saying, we can't have that legislation here. And so much of it's tied to the idea of that city, Indianapolis, Charlotte, wherever it might be, understanding that they've got to be attracted to everyone. They've got to be welcome to this diversity that's out there in the world, to have them come be a part of it, and that anything that you put in the way of that clouds the message that you work so hard at every single day to get out there to the greater world.
It's a very
I
good point.
suspect, and I hope it's not the case, that that's going to continue.
It will.
But I think you will see good mayors, good cities resisting that for all the right reasons about making their city a great, livable, wonderful, diverse city, that they're going to be on the front lines of saying that that's not the way that we should be going in the country. And it talks a little bit about Mayor James's sort of, all of us, the struggle between the state government and the local government, what the visions are relative to that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, I think, and that is an area in which, again, in which cities at all sizes seem to have common cause on that particular one. Mayor Riley.
Well, it's fair that the guy who went first goes last, because then you know the problem of everything already having been said. You know, an interesting thing is about people, some people being resistant to new people coming in. And so often you hear this, and it's not lots of people, but that someone will say, you know, we just moved 2 years ago from whatever state, and it sure is wonderful. Now, don't you let any more people come in, and it's, and I think, really, since America is a nation of immigrants, with a very few exceptions, Native Americans, then this, which I think is very bad for our country, this bit know-nothingism or anti-immigrant, and there are matters of, issues of about that we all need to continue to address. But that's not America. We have all benefited from the continued, and I think, Plato wrote this thing, and I'm not going to get off on that, but that wondered whether democracies would have a finite period, that they would just, after a while, they'd kind of all be the same, and they'd just start either disintegrating or not working. And in America, that's never been the case, because we've always had the energy of new people and new kinds of people coming in and helping make our country a little different and a little better. And the same is true with the cities. We naturally attract people that are different in language or experience. And what is happening in these cities is that young people are coming, or they're coming back. And young people are so open to new and so much more open to diversity. So I think there's a natural welcomeness of that in cities. One, which is a little off the point, one challenge that we face is the issue of density, because just as those who said, we moved here 2 years ago, and we don't want to let anybody else come in, is resistance to the density of residential occupation, which every city is different, and we must be careful about that. But there is plenty of room in Kansas City, or a lot of other cities, for more people to live residentially, and that's important. What is a challenge for mid-tier cities so often is that mass transportation is very expensive, and you really need some national or state resources, because in essence you're providing a national or state piece of infrastructure that's very costly, but also very necessary for people to be able to live successfully. And then just the last thing on that, we've talked about this more later on today, is getting the design of all of that right. Because you've got to be careful about, in these cities that have their character and style and history and sense, then the design of this new stuff and the density which is necessary. In Kansas City, it's easy. You just come look at what J.C. Nichols laid out almost 100 years ago and, follow that. But that's a challenge for mid-tier cities as well. You don't want to change its DNA. You can change the robustness of the people, but you need to make it work within an architectural or land development culture for the most part.
Great. Well, let's pick up on that now, because in fact, the DNA, to use that term, of all four cities that you represent, and I think I can still refer to Mayor Reardon as representing the Kansas City, Kansas, although he also, of course, represents the entire region. The DNA is actually quite different. We've grouped them together as 18-hour cities, but we know that it does not take a scholar of urban design to see the differences between Charleston and Kansas City. How much do you follow the existing DNA of a city as it grows and develops? How much can it be changed? J.C. Nichols, when he created Country Club Plaza, was effectively changing the DNA and thinking very broadly and making a great leap into an entirely new model, almost, that continues to influence us these many, many generations later. In Charleston, you have, I think, done brilliantly building on the traditional urban form of Charleston that you inherited, that you as mayor were smart enough to see was a resource, an asset, not a liability, which other people had thought it was. And so you began to reinvigorate it, but not reinvent it. You reinvented by reinvigorating, we might almost say. Mayor James talked last night about, and again briefly this morning, about the large size of Kansas City. Very, very different from Charleston in that way because it's not dense. It has spread out neighborhoods and very different nodes, although it also has a very strong downtown. How do you respond to that and deal with the balance between thinking boldly and responding to what's there? Mayor James, please.
I think, I'm not sure that you can change the DNA, but I do think that we have to evolve. We are looking at things differently now. There are huge issues of equity. There has been decades and decades and decades of disinvestment in parts of this city that have to be addressed. And the juxtaposition of a spanking new, growing, vital downtown on one side versus abandoned property, overgrown lots, segregation in another part has to be addressed. And you cannot address the built environment without taking into account the social issues.
Of course.
And the social issues drive things right now. I think it's fairly obvious if you paid attention on the national level, this is not the same. This is the type of atmosphere that I felt a little bit. It's not nearly as intense as it was in the 60s, but it's kind of got that 60s patina. People in the street, people standing up for what they believe in, marching, etc. And I think it's here to stay until we address some of those issues. And some of those issues have to do with the built environment and who lives there and their demands that it change. We have been fortunate to have had a mayor in Emmanuel Cleaver at one point, but the mayor who really was responsible for starting the downtown development, Kay Barnes, that we finished, but we still were never able to really make huge changes in the east side. That is where our focus has to be now to a large extent, because if we do not focus there, they become resistive to us focusing anyplace else. It's a matter of equity. Transportation, we have to look at issues of equity. Housing, we have to look at issues of equity. As we build and have higher and higher rents, and then things start to spread from the center and those rents start to increase, we start to push people out and we get into gentrification. That causes stress in a lot of different ways. So we have to evolve and recognize that some of the practices that we built into what we were doing in this country, both in terms of social policy and in terms of developmental policy, have had a horribly adverse impact on specific groups of people, and we have to address that as we move forward.
Great, thank you. Please.
Yeah, so for years in Knoxville, our leaders looked at the next silver bullet. You know, what big project, what could we bring in that would really put Knoxville on the map? And time after time, people resisted it, and in hindsight, rightfully so, because what really worked for Knoxville was when we started building on the assets that we had, on the architecture, on the strengths of our city that was already there, and so now we have come back. We have a major revitalization of our downtown, started by locals who just love that, you know, and instead of having the big dome artificial dome put over the square, the things that came in as the silver bullets. It was the organic redevelopment through people that really love the city, love the history, that have really made the difference, and it's attracted more and more people in. We, for years, the thought was, here are these beautiful hillsides and mountaintops. We need to develop every one of them. Well, what we realized is really part of our beauty, the thing that really set us out from many other places, is that we do have a beautiful wilderness area around us. We have tree canopy, we have mountains and the river. And so whereas a few years ago, there was a big fight over ridgetop and hillside regulations, instead now, I think there's general acceptance, thanks to the work of the Legacy Parks Foundation, that has come in to say that that is one of our biggest assets, being able to look out and preserve that canopy and preserve that space. And in fact, one of our biggest quality of life activities now is in preserving 1,000 acres of urban wilderness, which is just a mile or less from downtown, where you have 1,000 acres that we're preserving and connecting. That includes 10 city parks, 300-acre wildlife nature center, several hundred acres from the state wildlife management area, 4 Civil War sites, and 50 miles of trails, natural trails for mountain biking, that has been built by and large by volunteer labor. Blood, sweat, and tears of volunteers, and cases of beer, they tell me. And so this is building on the beauty, the natural assets, and we're actually turning it into an outdoor recreation mecca. And it's becoming one of the things that's attracting a lot of young people to Knoxville and retaining young people who are here through the university, expanding our greenway system, expanding bicycle lanes, all of that of building on the beauty and the assets that we have, rather than bringing in a big silver bullet that was going to make us, help us make our mark. We're making our mark by being authentic to who we are, our history, but not the negative part of the history. The positive part of the history that helps all people, and then for those who have been neglected in the past, who haven't had access, continuing to open the door and making sure that everybody benefits. That's our goal, that everybody benefits from this organic and authentic revitalization of our city.
Great, thank you. Mayor Reardon,
I'll be very,
on that?
yeah, I'll be very, all the good things have been said in a sense. I can speak directly a little bit to KCK, and what I see is some of the opportunity that exists there relative to the conversation. Let me just key a little bit off of what the mayors have just said, though. I do think that equity and social justice are big issues for nearly every city in the U.S., including mid-sized cities. And as Mayor James said, it's tied into a lot of things. Some of it, and certainly we know this, mayors know this, that much of this can be keyed to making sure that educational opportunities are robust for young people regardless of where they live in the city. And so much of the equity issue, I think, is tied up in helping individually lift people up and allow them to become participants in the economy and what's going on in the world. But if you don't take care of the physical environment, the built environment, I don't think you'll be successful. And so what it really comes back to is affordable housing in my mind, that that can make a neighborhood strong. And so for KCK, which was a blue-collar town at its core, you're talking about the best neighborhoods that we have in our core are ethnic neighborhoods on 25-foot lots. They're workforce housing that was built for the packing houses back in the early 1900s into the 1920s. And so figuring out how you take that built environment and respect and honor what the character is on a 25 or 35-foot lot, and then do good affordable housing that can sustain for the long haul. I think there's a lot of work to be done in all over, but quality affordable housing that really can sustain a neighborhood for the long haul, I think, is critically important, and it can honor a neighborhood and its traditions. And by the way, younger people tend to be more comfortable in a smaller housing style. So I think there's an appeal there that can bring diversity back into neighborhoods as well if you do it right. And I think focusing on that built environment, particularly at the housing level, is extremely important in this equity area, in my sense of it.
On the DNA or the
Yeah,
growth
yeah.
and change thing, I think that first of all, cities we're always listening. Certainly mid-scale, plenty of opportunity for input and direct participation from the citizens. They're wise and they're very helpful. And then, of course, the continuing to update your strategic plan. Very important. Just keep it fresh. Things are changing, whether it's on height or scale or other things. And then with every city is different. Our city, like every city here, is people are polite. They look in the eye. The city is kept very clean, and then there's some things that just wouldn't work there. So I have these we always have good friends that come to you with ideas. You know, I mean, no one's ever offered to bribe me or anything. It's your best friend or a good political supporter, the guy that helped you with the symphony project or something, and they come in with these ideas. So one group came in and they had this piece of land on Market Street, and they wanted to bring a Hard Rock Cafe, and they said, Joe's terrific. And I said, well, you know, we don't need a Hard Rock Cafe in Charleston. It just didn't fit our DNA, you know. And then we had the battle on 2 o'clock bar closing because we had a piece of the business district that was just too raucous. So we got that passed by one vote. And then the last couple of years on Upper Main Street, Upper King Street, where there was nothing not too many years ago, it is alive with young people, and but too alive, so that the density of the bars then made it a real happening scene that kind of personality shifted after about 11:45, and we've got residential neighborhoods nearby where we want people to get some sleep and kids go to school the next morning. And so the young people who love the bars and like being out there, they were very bad with me, an old fogey that wanted to, but you know what we did? We got a committee of 30-some people. We got people who owned some of those establishments and everything else. We had a polarity process team help us. And we ended up with a unanimous decision.
Wow.
And it's about, we'll start the not too many bars within a block, you know, and all of that, just so that the DNA, because it's good to have that, you know. And also, if you get too many bars on a block, we know what happens at 11 in the morning, there's nothing going on.
Right.
Because they're all closed. So that isn't good for anybody.
Right.
But I think it's that you never go to sleep on it. You know, I mean, you got to keep being alert, and you keep tweaking things. And the same with the height. We got lots of demand for density. We've got places that have never been built on, luckily in the upper part of our peninsula, with appropriate scale, allowing for dense residential and all like that. So you just keep listening. You always learn from your citizens, and they'll help you.
Seems to me that what you're saying is that there's a need always for balance.
That's right.
And to finding a kind of equilibrium.
That's right.
And part of the mayor's job is, in fact, to try to keep things in equilibrium.
That's right.
To the extent that that's possible. Let me ask you all then about how do you balance off the challenges of neighborhood versus citywide issues, and is that, I would think one of the things that at least theoretically ought to be a little bit easier in an 18-hour medium-tier city is keeping that balance and people in neighborhoods having a better sense of the overall city's needs, but maybe not. I don't know. I mean, it's probably a challenge all the time. Every little neighborhood obviously believes its concerns and issues transcend the bigger ones of the city and needs to be dealt with first. How do you guys and ladies balance that issue as you approach it? Anyone?
Probably all of us would agree, great cities are built on great neighborhoods, right? So great neighborhoods are the building blocks, and our neighborhoods are having strong neighborhoods and encouraging reinvestment and our own reinvestment, public and private, in neighborhoods are one of our primary goals. We have a neighborhood advisory council where we bring neighborhoods together. We actually, proactively encourage neighborhoods to organize into neighborhood associations because we feel it's more effective. We can more easily work with neighborhoods when they are organized and when everybody has their separate ideas of what the priorities are. So we work very closely with neighborhoods, and they, as we have public policies that we're promoting, we'll bring them to our neighborhood advisory council for their feedback and their understanding. And we have many public processes to vet what what we are proposing. And as a city, so a lot of our investment, we invest all over the city, but there's a lot of attention on downtown because it is coming back, and that's really the key to our future economic prosperity, is to rebuild from the inside out. We can no longer annex based on state legislation, which is okay because we have so many finger annexations from prior administrations that it's really hard to manage. And we know that if the core is dead, then it doesn't matter. It's just like the heart, right? If the heart's not strong, then the rest of the body's going to suffer. So our intention, at least my administration and the one before, is to reinvest from the core out. And so whatever neighborhood, wherever I go, I try to help them understand why that's key to the security of their neighborhood. Your neighborhood, if the downtown, if there's blight, if there's crime, if there's desperation in the core of the city, none of the neighborhoods, particularly first and second rings, neighborhoods, are going to be strong. So trying to, again, create that understanding of how we are codependent on one another, on how what happens in one neighborhood or downtown or impacts the others. Just calls for service, and among neighborhoods that think, say, one part of town, some neighborhoods get more attention from us than others. Well, if those are neighborhoods that are getting more attention, if there's crime, if there's blight, then that's more calls for service, which is going to impact the stronger neighborhoods' values and their taxes, ultimately. So when every neighborhood is thriving, then all of us benefit, so that there aren't the negative calls for service, but there's positive investment. So trying to articulate that, having people part of the process. One of the things we found is that as we try to redevelop and change our zoning codes and bring in form-based codes and reduce our parking regulations, a lot of things you need to do in the core of a city as you're coming back. Some of the neighborhood leaders who were the progressives 10 years ago are now the regressives because they don't get it. They were so used to protecting their neighborhoods that they don't get, some of the older folks, they don't get the mixed use that so many people want now, and that it's a more efficient way to redevelop. And so we have actually had meetings. There was one on urban gardens, which is, wow, who could be opposed to urban gardens? Well, some of these great neighborhood leaders from the past were opposed to them, and you have all these young people who are now homeowners and wanting to have urban gardens, and they're in the same meetings, and the older folks are saying, these are awful, they're going to be not tended, and they're going to be messy and ugly, and the young people are like scratching their head, not believing that somebody would be opposed to this. So that's really the interesting dynamic now, is to see the progressives from the past who aren't able to adjust to the realities of today on what the younger folks want.
That's an incredibly interesting point. I actually want us to come back to that because it's really, there's a lot to explore in that too. But your first point also, I think, is critical, that a city is not a donut. A city that develops like a donut will fail because it can't have a hole in the middle. And yet, for too long, we allowed the donut to be a model we tolerated, I think, because Mayor James, any thoughts on these?
Yeah, one way, and there's 50,000 ways to skin a cat, And there's all sorts of different approaches, and a lot of it often depends on not just whether a neighborhood association exists, but the quality of the neighborhood association itself. A slightly different approach. I have the ability to appoint people to 80, 90, 100 different boards and commissions. And I think it's important to do that strategically because very few people really have a clear picture of the intricacy of cities and the intertwined workings of cities until they actually start doing something in that context. So by strategically trying to place people in various boards and commissions, I believe that you create a lot of different ambassadors that are able to go out and say, you know, I used to think this until I got on this board. Now I think differently, and I understand how this matches up with that. They tend to be more open to looking at the totality once they're involved in a part of it. If they're not engaged in things that are directly related to the operation and building of a city, then it's very difficult for them to ever see the big picture. Because if you look at the saying of all politics is local, from a standpoint of somebody who's not engaged in the broad local, they're engaged in the narrow local, and that narrow local is their neighborhood and the governance of that structure. Show them the entire structure, let them get engaged in that so that when they go to their neighborhood association and issues come up, they can talk about the broader spectrum and why that's important.
Great.
This is kind of tactics, but I think it holds true for most mid-sized cities. Definitely, in my opinion, experience the tension between the neighborhood level and the broader vision, and the mayor has to carry the broader vision. And not only that, I think that there's two tools that can help continue down a path of the broader vision, and one of them Mayor Riley's already mentioned, which is a great strategic plan that you get buy-in from your city council or your governing body, and that you can articulate that in a broad way to the community as a whole, can help you stay focused and maybe avoid some of the neighborhood level squabbling, or at least not have that dictate where you're headed, which can happen. And then the second part is that mid-sized cities have great professional staffs. And if you can allow them to help you shape strategic planning in a way that the priorities of the city can really rise to the top, empower that professional staff to help you get to that place, let you articulate a zone or a lane that I think can be really, really strong if you can do it well. So the governing body's connection to the professional staff of the city and allowing them to be empowered to do their good work, if you can get into that team environment, and the mayor can help do that, you can really be high performing in my mind, and I think it can help you stay on that right path. So maybe that's a little bit tactics, but
but in fact this is tactics are part of the discussion, and indeed I think sometimes tactics are substance. I mean what Mayor James discussed a moment ago was also tactics, but it was an absolutely critical point, I think, about making people whose initial sense of investment is only neighborhood invested in the larger city by giving them some degree of responsibility for it. So, Mayor Riley, any thoughts on that?
Also interesting and right on point. When people would ask me, what do you do? What does the mayor do? I said, well, a mayor is in sales. And so we're always selling. We have the bully pulpit, the mics and the cameras and all of that. So we never miss an opportunity to educate or to reinforce the value of what we're doing in one neighborhood for the whole community. Whether it's affordable housing, you can easily paint the picture of why this is good for Charleston, or whether it's a new redevelopment downtown, the tax base, whatever, and then you add on to that the excitement of festivals and all of that you have. So you because the citizens, they deserve that, and part of that is always listening. One of the great things about this scale city is that you really have a chance to get to know the people and they get to know you. Now, even how many people live in Boston? Does anybody know? What about
Boston?
800,000.
Yeah. Well, when dear Tom Menino died, there was one of the articles and said that that in a poll, 40% of all Bostonians said that they had met Tom Menino. Well, you know, that probably wasn't quite correct, but we're around, and we're in those neighborhood meetings, and we're out on the streets and all of that, so that's a benefit, that we're not some remote thing, that people get to know us, and all of those opportunities, I coming out of church or coming out of a store or coming or whatever, you're always getting info, which helps shape you, and it's, you know, it's good info. And then there was one other thing that you probably will be happy to know. I can't read my notes, so I'll start.
Well, if it comes back to you in the next few minutes, just bring it up. So much has been said here that is stimulating and exciting. We could actually fill out this conversation for a while more, but I'd like to use the last few minutes we have to bring as many of you as we have time for and would like to join the conversation. So if there are some questions, please step up to one of the microphones and hopefully we can cover as many as there are. Yes, sir.
I'm Kelvall. I'm on the Nichols Management Committee and University of Michigan. It's so nice to hear or to give mayors an opportunity to be nuanced in their comments. It's really refreshing.
That's what we're hoping for.
And we know about your multiple challenges, from affordable housing to money for transit to gentrification to better schools, etc. I'm curious to know how you feel about your cities getting hotter. They're getting hotter at about twice the rate of the rest of the planet. Cities are heating up much faster, and you live in fairly hot climates. And I'm not talking so much about more cool centers for heat waves, but are you doing much in the way of reforestation and lighter colored pavements and rooftops and more street trees? And I mean, is that where does that fit in your list or your agenda of challenges?
In other words, climate change.
Well, no, this is a little different.
Okay.
This is local urban heat islands.
Okay.
But it's sympathetic. Dealing with those heat islands is also dealing with climate change.
Right.
So we're very actively addressing that. I hired the first urban forester for the city a few years ago, and we've put together a whole inventory and both a management of existing resources and plans for planting more trees and such. Our engineering department is very tuned in to greener development. So the way as we do our streetscapes, the way we engineer roads and infrastructure, it's addressing those kinds of issues. Our Office of Sustainability, it's a small office, but we have an overlay from every department has a responsibility and is actively involved in looking how they, whether it's an internal issue or working externally with the community, how we make Knoxville greener, more sustainable, more energy efficient. We're trying to lead by example, and we also have a energy and sustainability task force that meets regularly with community goals. So it's actually one of our major goals, something I ran on 5 years ago, and we continue to try and be a cheerleader for.
Great.
It's certainly significant in Kansas City. I can't add a whole lot to what Marilyn said. We've had a forester for quite some time. We do have quite a number of trees and looking to add more constantly. And we have a couple of really great engineering firms here who are really focused on exactly those types of issues. So it's something that we're very much aware of and something that we're taking concrete measures and making investments to deal with.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Reardon?
I would just say real quickly, I think there's a huge opportunity in all of this at the mid-sized city level to engage in offering a resource to the governing body to get them engaged in this understanding and knowledge, because at the end of the day, you need to have that governing body helping you develop momentum beyond what your staff may help you inform in this area. And I don't think it's an area that probably, the city I represented is paid enough attention to, not because there's not an interest or desire, but because it's probably not the opportunity for that kind of conversation beyond let's be Tree City USA and maybe some one-off kinds of things. The deeper thinking around a strategy for that is something that I think needs more of a conversation.
I think also if there were ever an issue that proved the necessity of the public administration in the public realm. It's this one. This is not an issue that you can say the private sector will take care of it.
Right.
Because the private sector is unlikely to invest in tree planting in the city. It's something only the public sector is likely to do. Mayor Riley?
Amen to all of that. And we've had the urban forestry a long time and a great tree program. And some years ago, we needed another push. So I woke up one morning with the idea of 10,000 trees sounds good. So I called a friend of mine who ran against me as mayor some time back, and I'm glad to add that all the people who ran against me as mayor are friends of mine now. Which just in this business generally, you don't keep enemies lists. You know, you don't hold grudges. You keep building. And one thing I was going to say back is the leveraging of first-rate professional staff. You know, 75 years ago, city governments, you know, very partisan, crony, hired and all like that. Which, you know, in America now, as we know, those are leverage points, and the smarter, the brighter, the more capable the people we hire, the better are. I don't know whether people work for me, or a Republican, or Democrat. I could care less. I just get the best people. So anyway, this guy agreed to chair the committee. So we got this effort. I don't know how many we got to the 10,000, and then we get people donate money to honor their parents and all like that. But it's a great thing to do, and it's very important to cool off.
And give a tree to Charleston, in effect, as to honor somebody or whatever. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it seems extremely important for mayors for them to grow their cities and grow the amount of families and people who live in them. But when you are putting together the culture of your city, do you put together, do you use any formula or algorithm to show that once we have too many families, or once we reach this threshold of people, we now will start damaging our culture? We will start being negative. I work for a company that actually sells housing technology to cities, and whenever we put together a system that says, well, right now, if we do the best we can, we still only have almost no vacancies. So we're going to open up the grid so that some of the families in the city can see housing opportunities elsewhere, because there are no more vacancies, there are no more affordable housing. Mayors, cities, it's never even an option. It's like no matter how crowded it gets, they still don't want to lose families. They still don't want their people moving to other cities. So is there a point where is that ever an option to say, okay, our city has reached a threshold, we are actually more damaging, we're starting to pass things where we are not required in the bill sidewalks, we're starting to be so lenient on all our development rules and making our city look poor in order to fit more people into the space where they don't fit? Is there ever a strategy where we say, now we reach out to outlying cities, states, and we start pushing our residents to other markets in order to make the culture and the livability in our city sustainable?
Not for us. I mean, if you're talking about space and density, that is not a problem in Kansas City. It's exactly the opposite. We want more people. And frankly, I don't think that I don't know of any mayor who says, you know what, we got enough. You guys go someplace else. I don't see that happening. What I think would be more likely would be more innovative solutions to deal with the density, as opposed to saying you don't want it, because you never know who you're pushing out. Are you pushing out the next Henry Ford? You pushing out the next Hall or the next DST? There's something. Frankly, your best example of that might be Manhattan, and I don't see them telling people to go away.
Yeah. Right. Well, unfortunately, the problem in Manhattan is the market is telling people to go away,
well,
not the mayor.
The market certainly controls it.
And the market is actually having a very troublesome effect, because it's making it harder and harder to retain the diverse community that was once there and was a hallmark of there. But that's a whole other discussion.
But that's kind of what you were headed at.
Right. What if the development is 20 years out? It's 20 years before we're able to match the demand with the supply. You still don't make any. You say, okay, well, we'll deal with it for 20 years.
Well, look at.
Well,
please, yes.
So I'm trying to understand, I guess, what you're getting at. First of all, I would say that we don't, I don't promote just development at any cost. We want quality to development. There are certain, there's a lot that we don't control as mayors, right? People own private property. We have rules and regulations, and if they follow those. And of course, there are people that always disagree in the community whether that's a good development or not, and they show up at MPC, they show up at City Council, at our Planning Commission or at City Council. But in general, where we are intentionally investing to leverage private investment and all, we're looking for quality development. And for us, because we do not have high density in most places, and we can't offer, we have a bus service, but it could be better, you know, the more dense you have along corridors and such, the more efficient and worthwhile it is to invest in the public transportation for that. So we're at a stage in Knoxville where we are encouraging density in certain places, like downtown, like along the commercial corridors. We're looking at changing zoning regulations in certain places to allow for more density. Now, folks out in the neighborhoods, and that's how we protect them. Some people in the neighborhoods, they don't want density because they've got their lots and all, and that's fine. But we're trying to help them understand as a community, we are discussing that density along corridors, density in certain places. First of all, it fills the needs for more and more people to have apartments and different types of housing than we already have. And it also you know, enhances our city, we believe, at the university. For years here, we have 30-some thousand students at University of Tennessee. If you didn't live on campus, or you didn't live right across the strip and live in the Fort Sanders, then the students went all over the city in apartments everywhere. Well, now the move is to add apartments close to campus, put them up, you know, have a higher density and taller buildings, so that students don't have to drive. They can walk, they can ride their bikes. So we're at a stage where density in certain places is good and valued, and we're trying to drive that.
Great, thank you. Good, good. Yes.
Hi, Ellen Dunham-Jones. I'm very honored to be on the J.C. Nichols Prize jury. And just really thank you, mayors, for such really wonderful comments. I wanted to bring up the issue that I see a lot of places kind of struggling with is reconciling all of the higher density, the greater transit, the street trees, all of the great things that are being, as we're redeveloping, revitalizing cities and suburbs, above ground, what we see, but sometimes the challenges of the lack of capacity underground. And so what's happening with the sewers and the stormwater and the power grids, and because they're less visible, you don't get quite the same political win, you know, in your communities for dealing with those projects. Do you have any advice or success stories to kind of share that other communities can really learn from? Obviously, we have to deal with the stormwater and the sewer issues and things, but how do we better reconcile the desire for increased densification above ground with also making sure we really have all that capacity underground?
I'll start not with the solution, but just to feed off of you a little bit, because it's a battle that probably many of us have struggled with, which is the realization that you have aging infrastructure, particularly in the sewer side of things, and an EPA that will mandate a certain pace as which to fix it, but offers nothing else in the way of an understanding about the affordability of that to a city that is challenged with folks that just can't shoulder all of it on their own.
That's right.
So I so wish we would have a federal government alignment on these issues that really tried to work with cities in a more collaborative way to solve this problem, because a city in the mid-size and in smaller than mid-size, the city's capacity, particularly an urban city, the city's capacity to address and remedy these issues on its own cannot move as fast as what the EPA would mandate, or even the city wants to. The capacity within its own tax-paying public, I just don't think can do it. So I'm ranting a little bit with you on this because I think it's a huge challenge, and I do think it requires more collaboration at the state and local level to be able to address this issue, particularly in aging cities where the work needs to be done. And by the way, the citizens that live there deserve that work to be done. But figuring out a solution within the city's own resources in many cases is extremely challenging to do.
Well, I'll certainly go along with that. We are under a 25-year uh, a consent decree with EPA that costs about $4 billion to deal with our overflow control system, sewer, wastewater, and water. The only way to pay for that is with rising water, wastewater, and sewer rates. Those rates are now perhaps among the highest utilities, including electric and others. And there's no way to get around it. So we're back to the EPA asking for affordability considerations. The part of the problem is, to be honest, that people got used or believed that water was free.
Right.
And people in office would often do things that reinforce that ridiculous belief by saying, and we're going to do this, we're not going to raise your water rates. Well, you should have. Because if you had raised the rates on an ongoing basis, then you would have been able to do the work. And it's always worse to have to go back and strip out and rebuild a system than to take care of it on a go-forward basis. So it's a huge issue. It's always going to be a huge issue. Our federal government is insensitive to what it does at this level. They mandate that it has to be changed, but they really don't help us get it changed. They just say do it, and we're forced to do it. With regards to other forms of infrastructure, it's not. I think one thing that we always have to do, and we especially have to do now, is to recognize that although water infrastructure is critical and other forms of infrastructure, we also have to be building digital infrastructure, because that's the information infrastructure that is absolutely critical to the businesses and the employment of people in a city. And that cannot lag behind either. And unless people are aware of it and do it when they're replacing the water, you're laying the conduit or whatever the other situations are, then you run into that problem as well.
Now, if only Google could create a fiber optic wastewater removal system, we would really be fine.
Exactly right.
Hey, I'm down with that.
So in Knoxville, we also had a consent decree, our utility board did, related to the sewer, and so they invested quite a bit of money in redoing the sewers. But after that, then they also started a major plan to redo water as well, and when they go into certain areas, of course, they'll do gas, they'll do whatever. So we actually have a very progressive plan in terms of infrastructure with our utility board. The city has also invested significantly in infrastructure, and like when we, along the strip that I mentioned at the University of Tennessee, we're investing $17 million. It's about $4 million that's from the city and the rest from our state transportation dollars, totally redoing the main area, the main strip through campus. And of course, everywhere we go in like this, the utility company goes in first, and they rebuild underneath. Then we come in and do the streetscape and the lights and such, and they're removing utility poles, they're going down, they're going underneath, or the utilities going in the alley. So we actually are investing heavily in infrastructure improvements as a city and as a utility board. Most of our downtown is being redone infrastructure-wise as well, and then the streetscape part of it. In fact, by the end of this year, almost every road downtown will have been completed and repaved, and so it's a major plus for our downtown area. And then we're moving out to other places as well in the city. One of our challenges in infrastructure are our state roads, and we are a pay-as-you-go state in terms of transportation dollars, and our governor has raised the issue that that we need to increase our gas taxes. They are, relatively low, and we have a lot of traffic coming through with I-40 and I-75 through our city, and we are at a point where we know we have billions of dollars of infrastructure needs across the state, and yet we don't have the coffers to pay for it. So that is a challenge for our state. So far, our legislature has not wanted to talk about it. We have a moderate Republican governor who is raising the issue, but we have a conservative Republican legislature that doesn't really want to touch it. So this is an election year, so it won't be touched, it wasn't touched this year. Hopefully we'll see some movement next year, because we have to have something done.
Yes, sir.
We're good on time.
Yeah, we just have a couple minutes.
Okay. Thank you all for your leadership. I'm, on the private side of things, working with the developers and architect. How does, from your perspective, does it look when new administrations, come in and there's shifts in priorities of leadership? And so, things change for the business community as priorities change from the, public leadership group. How does that feel from your perspective?
How would Joe Riley know?
Non-people that have been here for generations.
Been in office how long? 40 years? Yeah, I don't think he's seen many changes of administration. One of the reasons I ran was because I wanted the administration to change in the policies and the things that they were doing. But it's always a concern. You hope that one of my priorities is on those things that I believe strongly in is to build systems outside of city government that can carry on with some of those issues. Reading, for example. Making sure that the reading program survives whether or not I'm in office. KC Nova, our Kansas City No Violence Alliance, will survive whether or not I'm in office, because as we set these things up, what we try to do is set them up in such a way that they can be carried outside. The board I pointed to the reading program, I'm the only public person on it. All of the people in KC Nova are public, but they're in different areas, prosecutor, federal government, etc. So I think if the concern that we have as mayors is about some of the things that we believe passionately in, we have to find a way to keep them going. But we also have to recognize that one of the reasons that people run for office is because they think they have a better idea.
Right.
And they're going to come in and they're going to try to impose that idea.
Right.
I agree with everything Mayor James said, and you certainly have moments in time where you have to have mayoral leadership change direction. But once you hit the right spot, you could point to cities where you've seen a change in mayoral leadership, and yet, because I think business is attracted to stability and consistency, where that's happened. Indianapolis is an example. Oklahoma City, where you all will be this weekend, where you've seen a series of mayors come in and really sort of carry a baton for certain critical ways that the city's doing things well and carrying it forward. So every mayor is going to have an agenda, but in those cities that have hit a stride and they've got some momentum in certain areas, I think you've seen some places where there's been some consistency across changes in administration that's been pretty powerful. Oklahoma City's a good example of that, I think.
Well, and one last thing. I think it's absolutely critical that you have a chamber that's engaged and follows through on policies
That's true. I agree
themselves.
with that too.
Because you can't move a city without an engaged business community. And if the business community has latched on to certain things, they can carry it through
That's a great point.
different administrations, and good cities, I think, do that.
Right.
I've seen in the past in Knoxville where you had bad campaigns, vicious campaigns, and so an incumbent gets defeated, the person who comes in, trashes everything that had been done in the past and starts moving in their own direction. That's really tough for a city. Of course, ultimately the voters decide whether they want the administration to continue or not. But we have benefited in recent years that we have had a good peaceful and a baton handoff through administrations, and that has really helped us as a community. And the reason why we've had that is that we have had big major expansive public processes, both with the business community, the neighborhoods and all, coming in and getting behind a plan. And then so it's bigger than just one administration. There's a desire to see certain changes and certain processes happen, and that helps that baton handoff. And we are, in my situation, we're intentionally trying to queue things up, do everything we can over the next 3 years before I'm term limited, but queue it up so that it's easy for somebody to come in and take it over, make their own mark. But hopefully we're putting in place strategies that have a broad enough support that the next council, the next mayor will be able to just take it and run with it.
Very quickly, because I want to
Yeah,
hear.
we one more final question,
Mr.
but yes, go ahead.
Nichols' question.
Right.
And, just along the line what Madeline said, we have a duty as mayors to keep things moving forward as best we can for the next person. So my last 2 years, I got through council 2 separate modest tax increases, one for law enforcement, one for infrastructure, because I knew the next mayor, a new mayor is not going to be able to do that. So to make sure we had the funds available for 2 key, challenges the city was facing.
That's good.
It's a good reminder that there's no limit to what you can accomplish if you let someone else take the credit.
Amen.
That's right.
Amen.
Anyway, it's couldn't be more appropriate that the last question go to Wayne Nichols, who has been the moving force behind the J.C. Nichols Prize for these 15 years and who welcomed us all last night. Wayne?
It seems to me that kind of the elephant in the room that must face you folks as mayors every morning when you look at the television is the issue of inequality, racial disparity, alienation that tends to probably locate in geographic portions of your community. And how do you deal with that, both on a short term, because it hits you every day, and the media is the wolf dog chewing at your heels every minute, and how do you deal with it every day, and what do you see as a long-term approach to try and deal with this issue, which I think is going to dominate us for the next at least 5 to 10 years?
Wow.
Nothing like ending with a simple question.
So all the responses will be limited to 33 seconds.
Right.
It's a huge issue. It has always been a huge issue, and it's kind of like the water infrastructure. You just kept kicking that can down the road. The can has hit the wall and it's stopped, and now we have to deal with it. We have to first and foremost recognize the existence of the issue, that it is real, and that the only way that it is going to be solved is by communication, collaboration, and working together. We have to have good people from both sides working on it, and finding those good people is sometimes difficult. It's very difficult to have a conversation about race in this country because white folks get upset and feel like anytime something is said, or a lot of times something is said, that they're being called racist. Black folks get upset because they don't feel like people understand the experience, but the reality is so far in the middle of what needs to be there. Sometimes it's hard to be a good friend on either side of that discussion. The things that we have to do as leaders is to model behavior, first and foremost, to open doors where doors have previously been closed, if we have the key, to include people of not just race, but religion and national origin and age and gender and sexual orientation in everything. We have to show that you can completely exist and thrive in a completely inclusive environment. And then we have to tackle the real issues of income inequality that seems to affect single mothers and single minority mothers a lot. We have to tackle the issue of disinvestment, not just in the physical plant of neighborhoods, but in the educational resources of neighborhoods that have held people back and show people the way. And we have to tackle the issue of violence, because violence seems to thrive in areas where there is no hope. And those things are extremely difficult, and I don't think anybody has the complete answer. If we did, we'd be employing it. But it's very difficult, but it all starts with every individual reaching out and meeting somebody. You know, one of the things that I've said about gatherings like this is look around and tell me who isn't here. And then ask the next question, why aren't they? And then the next question is, what can I do to change it? And if you get to that level, then we actually start making progress. But it is important that when you walk into a room or a setting like this, talking about a discrete area, one that is engaged in economic development, one that generates a lot of income and money, look at who's not here, and then figure out why they're not and what we can do about it. That goes a long way towards solving the problem, in my opinion.
I think you could say, or it appears that I think you're saying that at least we are beyond the period of denial.
I'm not sure
denial
about
of
that.
comment. Or is that wrrong? Okay.
I'm not,
Okay.
well, you listen to some of the people
Depends
that
on
have
where
been
you are.
given voice by this political climate, and I don't
Yeah.
think they're beyond the period of denial.
Okay.
I think some of them are living in the
In the-
river
yeah,
of
yeah.
denial.
Or in high places of denial.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
Right.
Strong mayors can help lead this, that can help lead this conversation and engagement, like the mayors that are that I'm sharing the stage with. But we all are a part of this. And so, you know, on my mind is how can a Chamber of Commerce in a deeper way support and be a part of engagement and conversation that the mayors just expressed today, and show a true alignment and engagement from businesses in understanding that we're in this together and we've got to figure it out together too. And I think there's huge opportunities for us to do that in a deeper way. So.
Agree.
Mayor Riley, did you?
Well, thank you, Wayne, for the thoughtful question, and two quick answers. One is, it's something that we work on and must work on every day. It's about relationships, and whether it's your spouse or your children or a friend, you never put a relationship to bed. You always work on slights or misunderstandings or ways to enhance it, whether it's affection and respect. And so that's what we do and what we must do, and what our country must do. And then on something I'm working on, which is the most important project I've worked on in my life, and your eyes might glaze over when I say this, but building an African American museum in our city. And but this is the difference. A defect in America is we do not know this history. It was never taught. We are all Americans, but we were never presented, confronted, dealt with, seek to reconcile, understand this history. So I discovered in my work in Charleston, what historians know, is that 48% of all enslaved Africans who came to North America came through my city.
Wow.
48%. And in that city, we did not know we knew hardly anything about that or understood that, all of that, the Middle Passage, the forced migration, the work, nor did we honor it in understanding it and honoring it. So I announced this, I'm a slow worker, plotter, in my inaugural address in 2000, and we've been working ever since. And if you work hard, you get lucky. So I had a site for the museum that was a great site because I picked it out. There's no site. And then in our work on the history, we realized where the wharf was. And it was the largest wharf in the colonies, Gadsden's Wharf. And with great luck, I was able to reacquire that land, which had different kind of piers on it over 250 years. So we're going to build, if I get the money raised, a museum and cities get to do this every now and then. Mm-hmm. Cities get to do something for the country. You know, we can do something that no one else can do. So we can do something for our country. And so that's what we're going to do. And it would be like the Ellis Island, except that was free. But the one spot in America, Lonnie Bunch, who opened the museum Saturday, I was there, said, Joe, there are few sacred places of African American history in this hemisphere. And your site is one of them. And so it will be a museum, go back to Africa and all of that. But I think that's one thing that's missing in America is the kids, we're going to do a curriculum. Because, we have Black History Month in February. Well, the teachers don't know much, but they get a poster. And we know the Mayflower, but we don't know the 880 slave ships that came to Charleston. And so that's one thing that we're working on. But lots of things have to be done. It's a real problem in America. The problem exists at the degree that is unworthy for this country.
Yeah, so it is a problem, and it's something that I think the mayor has a responsibility to be involved and to lead the discussion of what and the actions associated with that. First of all, we start by making our administrations reflective of the diversity of our community. I mean, the people you hire and the people you appoint. The relationships are critical in the community, and we are proactive in developing and maintaining and nurturing those relationships. Our police department is very active in community policing and reaching out to both folks on the street and people where they are in churches or businesses and such. We have internally, we have two different diversity equity committees, one really judging our public service department and how we hire. And I had found as I was signing employee hire forms that we were hiring all of these white people from the rural counties. And I said, how is it? I know there are a lot of white and black people in our city who would would want these entry-level jobs. You know, it's one of the easiest ways to get into the city through public service. And we looked at how the practice that had just happened, it had just happened over time. And it turned out that foremen could basically pick their buddies. And so we totally revamped how even within our civil service rules, that somehow was allowed to happen. So that's been changed. And so we're able to increase the diversity of our workforce by those changed rules. And the workers themselves established an equity committee so that in that department, and so that as people were hired, that they made sure that there was a welcoming atmosphere and support for them. They also implemented a second chance program where we are proactively working with a local nonprofit who deals with a prison ministry. And as people come out of prison, we are hiring folks temporarily at first, but it allows them a chance to get experience and a work record and then be in a position to hire. So we haven't officially banned the box, as some are saying, but we do proactively hire people with a record. And we formed a Save Our Sons initiative in response to the national effort among mayors to address the problem of men and young men and boys and young men of color who are disproportionately a part of violence in our communities as victims and as offenders. And we are tackling that head on and working with the community to create the opportunities that our young men and our boys need so that they won't be victims of this and that they have opportunities. So there are any number of things that are being done, because a lot of us mayors talk about this in our community. It is a problem. We have to tackle it. And also in terms of jobs and contracting, we've set actual goals. Each of my department heads have goals for minority contracting over the next year. And so being proactive, not being afraid to talk about it, and really sharing among ourselves what's happening or not, what's working, what's not working in our communities.
Thank you. We are, sad to say, term limited by the clock for this panel. Thank you, all four of you, for an extraordinary meeting.